You might have heard of the Buffalo Wild Wings Blazin challenge, where you get 5 minutes to complete 10 of their hottest wings without any water. You might also be familiar with a little something called the mile, like in gym class. Well, I'd like to introduce you to a challenge that combines the two. 10 Blazin wings, 4 laps around the track, and no water. Welcome to the Blazin Mile. Up until the night before I did this, for some reason I had it in my head that the Blazin challenge was 5 wings in 5 minutes. So I was stressed when I found out that it was 10 wings, but by that point it was too late to back out. They used to give you a t-shirt for completing it, but now they give you a sweatband and a scoop of vanilla ice cream. I wish I could tell you this challenge had some sort of redeeming motivation behind it, but it was literally just an intrusive thought that popped into my head and I was like, I should try that. On the day of the challenge, I drove 40 minutes to my not-so-local Buffalo Wild Wings. Perks of living in a small town. The conditions on the day were great for running, about 45 degrees and a little windy, which wasn't a huge deal, it just meant that I'd have a little wind resistance on the backstretch. My plan was to distribute the 10 wings across the 4 laps. To stay true to the rules of the Blazin challenge, my goal was to keep my wing time to under 5 minutes. And I figured I could run the mile in under 7, so my hope was that I'd finish the whole thing in under 12 minutes. The rules also stipulate that you can't have any water until you're done, so I wouldn't drink water until I'd finished all 10 wings and all 4 laps. I warmed up a little bit, put my drone up in the air to get a bird's eye view, and then I got started. I dove right into the first few wings, which initially were no problem. I know from experience that ultra hot wings typically have a little bit of a delayed effect, but these ones didn't seem like they were going to be too much of an issue. I got out of that first stage in 1:02, which was pretty solid. I figured if I spent about a minute on each of my 4 wing stops, then I should be well under 5. I didn't want to wear myself out on that first lap, but I kept a pretty decent pace. My stomach felt pretty weird, like right in the upper abdomen region beneath my rib cage. And it wasn't just feeling full, like I could definitely tell that there was something with chemical properties in there. I finished that first lap in 1:34, which is roughly a 6:16 pace for the mile. And at this point, I was feeling optimistic. But for some reason, the next 2 wings went a little slower. I was hitting about 20 seconds per wing on that first round, but this time around it took me about 30 seconds per wing. Still not unbearable with the spice, I just really had to work to chew. It would have been way easier to wash the chicken down with some water.
My future self is not going to thank me for this. But you know what your future self will thank you for is ordering meals from Factor.
Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. And Factor is the perfect solution if you're looking for fast, restaurant-quality meals that are ready to go whenever you are. I read this book last year called Atomic Habits, and it talks about the concept of a Ulysses Pact. So basically, Ulysses had his crew timed to the mast so he wouldn't steer the ship into the rocks when he heard the sirens and his will was weak. The point is, if you wait until the last minute to decide on something important, you can't always trust your willpower in that moment. But if you lock in a good decision ahead of time when you're thinking straight, you're going to set your future self up for success. And that's what Factor allows me to do. If I wait until the last second to decide what to eat, more often than not, I go with options that don't leave me feeling great in the long run. But when I have Factor in the fridge, it makes those decisions easy, especially since their meals are ready in just 2 minutes. I'm also really excited about these cold brew latte shakes you can add onto your order. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I tried them and I was like, that's pretty good. They're made with almond milk and have 18 grams of protein and 110 milligrams of caffeine. So if you want to make a decision now to set your future self up for success, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code REVUE50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. That's Factor75 and the code is REVUE50. I wasn't thinking super clearly, so I took off for my next lap with chicken still in my cheeks, which was a terrible idea. And honestly, that might even disqualify me in a sanctioned race, but lucky for me, I make the rules here. Immediately on that second lap, I just started feeling terrible. Like compared to the pain from the spice I've experienced from other wings, these were nothing. But my stomach was feeling even worse than on the first lap. So my pace started to tank. I was trying to chew, breathe, and not throw up all at the same time. Finishing lap 2 meant I was halfway done. My pace on that lap had fallen drastically to a 10-minute mile, so I knew I'd have to pick it up. At this point, I was still optimistic about getting under 5 minutes for the wings, but I'd get hit with a dose of reality soon enough. The next 3 wings took me forever. Literally more than double the amount of time it took me to eat my first 3 wings. So at this point, I would need to absolutely pound the final 2 wings in order to keep my time under 5 minutes. Despite specifically reminding myself to finish chewing before I started running, I guess the urgency of the moment got the best of me and I somehow took off running with my cheeks full of chicken again. My third lap was pretty similar pace-wise to my second lap, but at least this time I was over the hump. There was more behind me than there was ahead of me. Just 2 2 more wings and 1 more lap. But as I was rounding the turn to finish lap 3, something unexpected started to happen. The wind picked up significantly and started to overpower the motors on my drone. I had made sure that the drone had more than enough battery life to hover while I completed the challenge, but what I hadn't anticipated was wind gusts that were too strong for the drone to stay in one place. As I started my final 2 wings, I tried directing the drone back towards me, but the wind was so high that it kept moving the drone backwards even when I had the throttle at full speed. And I should note here that the drone has an automatic return to home feature where it'll come back to its launch point when the battery gets too low. But that feature is kind of worthless if the drone doesn't have the strength to fight through the wind. At this point, I started to panic a little bit. I was thinking that maybe my drone was flying its very last flight. At one point, it got crazy close to the roof of this campus building. So, full disclosure, I stopped my watch right as the drone started to make an emergency landing. Apparently, fighting against the wind had drained the battery to almost 0, so it was just like, hey, like it or not, I'm going down right here. For me, priority number 1 was don't hurt anybody, and then priority number 2 was to land the drone somewhere that was retrievable, so not on a rooftop or in a tree. And somehow I managed to get it away from that building, past this construction site, over this pedestrian, and land it in an empty field on the campus where I was running. I wasn't about to quit the challenge though, so I just left it there and hoped no one would steal it. So as soon as the drone landed, I restarted my watch and knocked down my final wing, a little bit faster than the previous round. I took off on my 4th lap and picked up the pace since I knew it was almost over. But I'm gonna be honest, I just felt so bad. As I'm sure you can tell from my face, this was not a pleasant experience. I crossed the finish line with a final lap of 1:39, which was the pace I'd been aiming for from the beginning. I'll tell you my overall time in just a second, but first I need you to know that my plan was to challenge someone watching this to complete a Blazin mile faster than I did. But I've got to say, I do not recommend that anybody try this. That was terrible. Like, I was unwell. At one point my right eye started burning and I got worried that maybe I had touched it without realizing it. And after reviewing the footage, sure enough, here's me making contact with the eye region with a hand that almost certainly has hot sauce on it. Classic. I went over to get the drone, which thankfully was right where I left it, and then after my heart rate returned to normal, I became aware of a stinging sensation around my mouth and nose. So I guess like the adrenaline from running distracted me from the spice that whole time. Alright, here are my final results. My total wing time was 6 minutes and 12.5 seconds. My total mile time was 8 minutes and 8.5 seconds, which means my cumulative time was 14 minutes and 21 seconds. I obviously didn't finish the wings in under 5 minutes, but personally, I feel like I went through a lot to complete this challenge and still deserve to wear the headband. I sat down to enjoy a celebratory scoop of ice cream, and this exact moment was when I remembered that it had been over an hour since they had boxed up my order at Buffalo Wild Wings. That's probably also why they have a no food or drink policy on the turf. I cleaned it up though, I promise. Again, I wish I could say that there was something more redemptive about this experience, but sometimes I think you just gotta be humbled. And most importantly, just remember that even when it doesn't feel like it, it's gonna be okay. I'll see you soon.
I feel so bad.